welcome to today's live stream. Thank you for joining. Please do say hi in the comments if you're joining live, and if you're joining on catch up, also say hi in the comments. It'd be great to hear where you're joining from. I'm just going to wait a few seconds just to give people a chance to join the live stream. But please do say where you're joining from, and if you have any questions at all for me this session, please do pop them in the comments and I'll answer as many as I can. See how many I have time for at the end. Hi Colin, thanks for joining. So my name is Zoe Clark. I'm Programme Manager here at NAS, and today I'm going to be talking all about travelling with Axial SpA, which is a massive topic. So I'm going to try and cover as much ground as I can in this relatively short session. But as I said, please pop your questions in the chat box. I'll cover those after I do a short presentation. And also do share your experiences and your advice with each other as well. That's the great thing with these sessions, is that you're able to share your advice with each other and get different tips and tricks from there as well. So the session is recorded, so if you can only join part of this, you are welcome to catch up afterwards. I'm also demonstrating some exercises that might be helpful when you're sitting on a long journey, so there'll be something that you can come back to anytime to revisit and hopefully make those journeys a bit more comfortable. If you're joining on catch up, hi, welcome. And yeah, as I said, please do get involved in the comments. And if you have any questions when you're watching on catch up, you can always email me, zoe@nas.co.uk. So to get started, I'm going to do a short presentation to give a bit of an intro to the topic, cover some of the main points, and then we'll get into the Q&A as well. So I'll keep an eye on the questions as they come through. So I'm just going to pop some slides up and hopefully you can all see that. So I'm just going to double check that we're definitely live on Facebook because we had some tech issues last time. I can see we're live on Instagram, so hi everyone, thank you for joining on there. And once we've finished the live, I'll pop the recording onto our Instagram page as well, so you'll be able to come back to it there, and it will be on our YouTube channel too. Yep, I can see we're live on Facebook too, wonderful. So to get started, in terms of travelling with Axial SpA, I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about me first and why I'm talking about this. So I am a Programme Manager here at NAS, but I've been living with Axial SpA for just over 11 years myself, and I'm also an allied health professional as well. So hopefully I'll be able to share a mixture of general advice as well as some personal experiences too. And I will share all the slides afterwards. They've got some useful tips and tricks on there, but also they've got some links as well. So I'll include a link in the comments on each of the streams, so you can go and download the slides and you can access all the further resources that I'll mention throughout the session as well. And I can see we're having a little bit of issues with the slides because they're not clicking through properly, but bear with me, I'll make it work. So firstly, looking at when you're traveling with Axial SpA, it can be really helpful to plan ahead. Like everything when you live with a long-term condition, we do have more to think about when we're looking at traveling and going about our day-to-day life, unfortunately. So taking some time to plan ahead really can make a big difference. It can reduce the stress, but also it can make the holidays and trips much more enjoyable as well. So the first thing I would say, a major thing, particularly if you're going abroad, is to make sure you have good travel insurance. And when you are applying, always declare all your conditions, and including anything that you're under investigation for as well. Because if you don't declare everything, then even if if you have to use the insurance for any reason, it might not be valid. So it's really important to include all of those. Do speak to your GP about any vaccinations that you may need, especially when going abroad. And if you're on medications such as biologics, the GP or a pharmacist should be able to check whether they're safe for you to take while taking biologic therapy as well. Or they can advise that if it's not safe to take, what you can do to keep yourself safe in the meantime. I'd like to highlight the sunflower lanyard, which I imagine most people are familiar with. So this is a green lanyard that you see people wearing, and it's got sunflowers around it. And it's a really nice, subtle and discreet sign to staff as well as the public that you may have an invisible condition that you might need some assistance with. So it doesn't necessarily communicate what your condition is or how someone can help you, but particularly for staff, they're trained to spot this and then ask you if there's anything they can assist you with. So that can be really useful when you're traveling, particularly through busy places as well. It can be helpful to, when you're looking at sort of planning for your holiday or your trip, asking other people as well. So ask your friends and family if there's anything that they think would be helpful. Sometimes when you're that one step removed from it, you can think about some more practical ways to help. And also they may well offer some help and assistance with things as well. For example, taking heavier luggage for you, or helping with the journey, giving you a lift somewhere rather than you having to drive yourself, that sort of thing. So it's always worth asking others and considering accepting their help as well. It's very important to think about the clothing and the footwear that you wear while traveling. Make sure that you're wearing loose, comfortable clothing, particularly if you get rib pain or hip pain, making sure that you've not got any sort of tight, restrictive clothing that's going to be uncomfortable, especially if you're sitting for a long period of time while you're traveling. And footwear, you really want flat shoes that have a really good supportive sole, so it gives you that support when you are then walking about while you're traveling. Now, this last tip about planning some distraction techniques, that's not if you're driving. If you're the driver, then please don't use any distraction techniques. But this is for anyone who's a passenger, or if you're on a long train journey, long flight, things like that. Just thinking ahead as to what would be a good distraction technique for you if you do start to experience any pain or stiffness building up. It can be really useful to think about that in advance. It might be that you create a playlist of music that you find relaxing and distracting. You might have meditation techniques that you like, specific hobbies that you can take with you, or download movies ahead of time, that sort of thing. So just sort of plan ahead, think about what might be useful, so that if you do find that your pain levels are building up, then you've got something you can go to help distract you from that as well. Now, it's really important to take into consideration everything when you're thinking about your journey. I think it's really easy that we can think, oh, I'm flying from here to here. It's a 3-hour flight. What can I do to look after myself in that time? But actually, you've got to think about all the steps before that and after that. So you may well be flying from one place to another, but do you have a car journey to get to the airport? You then have that process of getting through security, the wait time after security before boarding the flight, then the flight. Of course, at the other end, you've got to get back through security and baggage claim, everything, and then that onward journey to your destination as well. So actually, when we think about our whole journey, thinking about all those different steps, you can look at areas where you might struggle, or areas that you can find some things that are going to help you and help make that journey easier. So for example, if you've got a long haul flight, you might think, actually, you know what, I'm going to travel down to the airport the day before. I'm going to stay in a hotel right by the airport so that I can have a good night's sleep, be well rested, recover from that car journey if you find that car journeys trigger your symptoms. Excuse me, and then that breaks your journey up a little bit. And so looking at your journey as a whole can really help you see any opportunities to make things a bit easier for yourself. Do make sure as well that you pace yourself before, so you're really letting yourself kind of build up, because quite often it's a really busy time getting packed, getting organized. There might be things like you've got to help someone take care of your animals, get your house sorted, things like that. So it can be really difficult to pace in the run up to a holiday or a trip. So it's important to start thinking about things much earlier on. Spread your packing out over a few days if you're able to, and just really sort of pace yourself in the run up to the trip. And then also on the other side of it, think about what you're doing on the day that you arrive and the day after. Try to make sure that you've got some downtime, some time to recover from the journey. It can be really frustrating sometimes thinking about pacing when you're thinking about getting on holiday and you just want to go and have fun and enjoy yourself. But actually taking that time to pause and to pace and to look after yourself and let yourself recover from that journey enables you to have much more fun on the rest of the trip, rather than if you overdo it all in one go. That can then have an impact. A flare can last much longer than a trip at times. So just taking that time to pause, if that's going to be helpful for you. Now, car journeys, I have linked at the end of the slides to a video that I did all about driving with Axial SpA, because that goes really in depth into things like the position that you have in your car, any adaptations you can make, and talking to DVLA, all those sorts of things. So if you do have a long car journey coming up, go take a look at that video, and hopefully it's got some helpful tips for you. But I think the main thing to highlight is really making sure that you plan your journey well in advance, and you make sure that you schedule in those rest breaks. There are lots of there may be sort of nice scenic places that you can stop, or sort of big rest stations where you can have a walk around and have a stretch. Because even if you're a passenger in the car and you're able to do some seated stretches, the best thing you can do with your axial SpA is to get up and walk around and move around as frequently as possible. So every couple of hours, ideally, you'd want to stop, be able to get out of the car and have a stretch. Because even if it feels okay at the time, sometimes it's only afterwards that we realize that that pain and that stiffness has really built up. So it's really helpful to plan that in ahead of time, build it into your journey so it's not stressful, and then that helps kind of reduce the impact your symptoms may have on you. Now, focus a lot more on flying because we get so many questions about this, and we really can break it down into all stages. So kind of when you're booking for the flight, when you're at the airport, and on the plane as well. So I'm going to go through it in that order. So when you're booking, do contact the airline in advance if you need any assistance, if you've got reduced mobility, or if you need any help sort of either on the airplane, or particularly if you're a wheelchair user, because different airlines have different policies in terms of what you can do with your wheelchair during the flight as well. So it's really helpful to contact the airline well in advance, get things all booked in and sorted, and that takes some of the stress away for you. When you're looking at choosing a seat, there are a few different options that you can think about. So some people prefer to have a seat that has the extra leg room so they can stretch their legs out, can take the pressure off the hips and the lower back if you're able to do that. Some people prefer to have the aisle seat so then you're able to get up and walk around much more frequently and more freely. But personally, I like to have the window seat because I like to sleep for as long as I can on a flight and then have some short stretch breaks in the middle. So certainly for short haul, I prefer to have the window seat so I can lean, I can move my position, and I find that a little bit more comfortable for me. So just think about those different seating options and what will work for you. And you'll find that a different seat probably is suited more to a short haul flight compared to a long haul and so on. So for me, I probably wouldn't go for the window seat on a long haul because I'd much rather be able to get up and move around as much as possible. Thinking about your bags as well. So when you have checked bags, try to check in as much as you can so that then once you're through security and you're at the airport, you've got as little to carry as you need to. But the most important thing is to make sure that you have your medication in your hand luggage so that if anything did happen to your checked bag, you've still got your medication available. You're not going to have any delays with that. And then in terms of priority boarding, again, this is a very personal thing and can depend on the length of the flight as well. So some people prefer to have priority boarding so that you're able to get onto the plane, get yourself settled, you're not feeling as rushed then. Or you may prefer to stay in at the gate a little bit longer and board a little bit later if you'd like to kind of really minimize the time that you're sat in your seat on the plane. So for me, for short haul flights, I do that. I stay at the gate until the queue's really gone down. I don't bother queuing, so I can't stand for very long without lots of pain. So I take a seat, have a few stretches, and then I get on as late as I can really. And I find that a lot easier because then it means I can be moving around in the airport right up to the start of the flight pretty much. And then I can get myself comfortable and have as little time sitting as possible. So again, just think about those different options, what would best suit you. And if you're traveling with others as well, just discussing that and explaining that, because sometimes when we're traveling with others, we follow what they are used to doing or what they wish to do, but actually think about what would be most beneficial for you and make sure that you communicate that. Now, when you're at the airport, there is support available. So if you need assistance, obviously, as I said, you can pre-book that. But also, if you use a mobility aid, then often you can go to the security section and there's an assistance lane. And usually, if you have a visible mobility aid or the sunflower lanyard and you explain to them, you're able to go through and sort of fast track the security lane. So that's well worth checking if you don't need to book the full assistance. Obviously, please allow plenty of time to still do that, just in case there is a queue or if there are any issues with that. But that can be really helpful if you find that standing and queuing for long periods is difficult for you. And once you're through security, just making sure that you're balancing that time that you're stretching whilst also resting as well when you're waiting. So sometimes it can be really easy to sort of wander around the different shops and then end up feeling like you've overdone it. Or the other way around, you can get yourself comfy if it's really busy and there are very few seats. So try and just get that mixture of being active, keeping things loose before you're then going to be sat down for a long period of time. whilst also then having those rest periods built in as well. And once you're on the plane, there are some quite simple but really helpful things that you can do to make sure you're as comfortable as possible during the flight, but also reduce the impact that you're feeling afterwards as well. It's really important to keep hydrated. I think when we're traveling, the temptation can be to not drink as much, or we just forget to. So it's really important to make sure that you keep hydrated regularly, because this can actually help with your pain levels overall and also your general health as well. I'm going to demonstrate some seated stretches once I finish the presentation, because at the moment I know I'm very small on the screen. So I'll go through those because they can be helpful whether you're on a plane, on the train, or in the car. So I'll go through those shortly, and you can always revisit those. And they're just some simple stretches and quite subtle that you can do without elbowing the person next to you too much. So I'll go through those shortly. But as much as I say, sort of doing those stretches can be useful, they're definitely not a replacement for getting up and having a walk up and down the aisle, both in terms of your axial SpA, but also in terms of your circulation as well. There's no sort of replacement for that, so trying to do that as much as you can. And also just changing position frequently in itself can be helpful. So whether that's sort of shifting from one hip to the other, so you're taking the pressure off one side, or sort of doing different positions with your legs as well, so crossing the legs, keeping them uncrossed for periods for circulation as well. Just make sure that you're moving around nice and regularly. And then there's a few different sort of makeshift ways that you can keep comfortable as well. So using things like a neck pillow, as pictured here. You can often get inflatable ones if that's easier than having a full sort of neck pillow that you can't fold down or anything. But also you can use a jumper or cardigan as a makeshift pillow as well. So just rolling it up and popping it in the small of your back can be really useful to give you that added support, because often plane seats are really uncomfortable. So just giving you that extra lumbar support can really take the pressure off your low back and pelvis especially. In terms of train travel, so some key things to think about is firstly station accessibility. Before you book your train ticket, then do make sure that you check the accessibility of the station and make sure it's suitable for you, particularly obviously if you're a wheelchair user. And usually you can call the stations in advance to chat to someone as well, so that's worth checking into, or just checking on Google. If you're able to pre-book a seat, it can be useful to think about what type of seat would be most beneficial to you. So if you're traveling with a lot of luggage and you struggle reaching overhead with heavy bags, then trying to book a seat nearest the luggage rack can be useful, because then you can store your luggage away, but it's also nearby if you need to get anything, but also for security and peace of mind as well. If you live with inflammatory bowel disease, which a proportion of people with axial SpA do also have, then sometimes you can pre-book a seat nearest to the toilet, which can give you peace of mind as well. And then you can also look at sitting in a priority seat as well. They tend to be much nearer the doors to the train. And this can be particularly useful if you have to change trains and you've got quite a short period of time between your changes, so you're able to sit much nearer the door. And a note on that as well, if you do have a change that's quite short and you know that you're going to have to walk quite briskly to reach the next train, trying to get up sort of 5-10 minutes before the train reaches the station can be really useful. And just standing in the aisle or near the doors and doing some gentle stretches and movements to help loosen up. If you have been sat down for a while and things have stiffened up, sometimes it can be really uncomfortable to then have to suddenly do a brisk walk, particularly if you're carrying things. So making sure you build in that time to help you loosen up before you're then getting off and onto the next train. And then this badge here that I've pictured, the Please Offer Me a Seat badge. This is offered by TfL for the London Underground and can be really useful. Personally, I have one, and it can be useful when the train is busy, just to give a bit of a visible sort of sign to people that you need a seat. I would say that my experiences have been quite hit and miss. There have been times when I've been stood wearing my badge with my walking stick and no one's noticed because everyone's sort of in their phone or head in a book. But there have been times when I've just stepped onto a carriage and someone's leapt up and offered me their seat because they've spotted it. So it can be really useful, particularly if you're like me and you feel a bit uncomfortable asking people for a seat, because I also can't tell if someone might need a seat. It can be really good because then generally the people who are offering a seat, aren't people with invisible conditions like us as well. So that's worth looking into if you're doing a lot of tube travel as well. And just a note in terms of ships, so cruises or ferries, again, it's just looking at planning ahead, contacting them in advance, because there's lots of different things they can do to help in terms of accessibility, particularly with reduced mobility. And if you're booking a holiday where everything's included, so it's things like the flights right through to the cruise, if you contact the company that you book through, generally they can then liaise with every step of the way and make sure that you have that assistance all the way through. And that gives you peace of mind, particularly on a long journey. That can be really helpful. And just some general tips in terms of while you're traveling. So I mentioned it with flying, but when you're traveling in general, just making sure that you're keeping hydrated, or as hydrated as possible, good for your general health, but also for your pain levels as well. And depending on the trip, do consider the bags that you're using. So it might be that for a short city break where you're packing relatively lightweight, using a rucksack might be a little bit easier. Especially one that distributes the weight evenly on both shoulders and has good thick straps to help reduce the pressure on the shoulders. That can be most useful, particularly if you're going to quite an old city where it might have a lot of cobbled streets or a lot of steps. Somewhere like Venice, I learned, is not somewhere that you want to take a wheelie suitcase, because you're constantly going up and down over the bridges, over the canals. So for that type of holiday, I'd take something where you're able to have a rucksack on your back, so you're not doing lots of lifting. Whereas for other journeys, you might find that a wheelie suitcase is suitable. But if you get a lot of shoulder and neck pain, then the photo on the right shows one of the wheelie suitcases where you can have it to the side of you and you're sort of pushing it along. And that can be a lot more comfortable. And you can also then switch sides nice and easily, and it can reduce the strain as well. You might also like to consider whether you want to pack two smaller bags rather than one larger bag, just to help kind of reduce the strain. If you're then carrying them, you can have it evenly on both sides as well. So that might be a little bit more comfortable. And of course, if you're traveling with someone else, then considering if they'd be able to carry things for you or help with that too. As I mentioned, with flying, making sure that you're changing positions nice and regularly, that can really help. If you're not able to get up and move about, still making sure that you're shifting your position, you're shifting where your body's feeling that pressure as well. And I discussed a little bit about pillows or makeshift pillows. So do consider that when you are packing and considering what you're wearing for the journey. So wearing a jumper means that then you're able to use that in the small of the back, or even if you're in a window seat, using it to lean on onto the window as well can be a little bit more comfortable. And as I mentioned, I'll go through some seated stretches shortly that you'll be able to use for a journey. And then also considering your medication timing. So some people find that taking an anti-inflammatory just before they're going to be sat down for a long while helps, because obviously when you're sitting for a long period of time, that's when the inflammation can sort of build up and settle in the joints, which causes that pain and stiffness. So sometimes taking an anti-inflammatory before you're going to be in that position, that helps reduce the impact that it has. So for this, I'd always say to speak to your healthcare professional to get some really personalised advice on what medication would be suitable for you. And particularly with anti-inflammatories, they may well want to prescribe something that will protect your stomach, or just make sure that you take it when you've eaten something as well, so it protects your stomach. Talking of medication, I'll go through a little bit because we do get lots and lots of questions about this, particularly in terms of biologics as well. But in general, it's really important to order your medication well in advance of your holiday, particularly if there's a bank holiday coming up and the GP is going to be having reduced hours. Making sure you get that ordered well in advance so you don't have that last minute stress of trying to get something before your trip. It's really important as well when you're going abroad to look at whether there are any restrictions in the country that you're traveling to, particularly with things like codeine-based medications or opioids. Often there are restrictions in various countries, so make sure that you check that before traveling. And just some key things to remember. So as I said earlier, making sure that the medication is in your hand luggage rather than any checked bag, so that you know that you've got that, even if your bag does get delayed. Hopefully that wouldn't happen, but if it does, then you've got your essential medications. That's really important as well. Do take a copy of your prescription as well, because this shows that these medications are prescribed to you. So if you do get stopped through security, it's a lot easier. You're able to show that they're for you. and similarly travel with them in their original boxes, and with the label on from the pharmacy that shows your name as well. So again, it just all adds up. It's really easy and clear to show that these are medications prescribed to you individually, rather than traveling with them, say, in a Dosset box or something like that, where they're unidentifiable. They don't know what medication it is or who it's prescribed to. So definitely keep them in their original packaging as well. You can always take an empty Dosset box with you that you then fill up once you're at your destination to help just sort of day to day, then you know what you're taking, but make sure that you travel with them all organised like that as well to reduce any risk of any complications. And then in terms of traveling with biologics, it definitely depends on sort of how long the journey is, where you're traveling to, particularly the temperature of the country that you're traveling to, and also sort of how long you're going to be traveling for as well, and when your dose is due. So we'd always recommend chatting to either your biologics nurse, if you're able to get in contact with them, or the home care sort of delivery company. Often they have a pharmacist that you can speak to, and you can explain your situation of how long you're going for, when your dose is due, how long you're going to need to keep it sort of out of the fridge, and they can give advice on sort of how best to travel with it. But generally, most airlines are happy that you're able to travel on an aeroplane with them, and you just have it in a cool bag in the cabin with you. Some airplanes, we've heard from people where they've been able to actually put them in the fridge during the flight, which has been helpful. But again, it's all about sort of chatting with them beforehand, contacting beforehand, particularly if you need to take a sharps box with you. And again, making sure you have just some paperwork saying they're prescribed to you. They're in the original box with their label on as well, which shows they're prescribed to you. And then you can get lots of different cool bags online, which are really useful. And we've got a link on the website, which I'll share in the slides, which goes through some particular brands, which can be really good for keeping them cool for a longer period of time. So yeah, do get in contact with us if you need any advice on that, if you're not able to get through to your biologics nurse or the home care company. But generally, they're the best place to ask because they can give that very specific advice. Now, in terms of when you're away from home, there are a few different things that we've heard from lots of people that are the most difficult when you're away and you have axial SpA. So firstly, the beds. It's really difficult when you don't know whether the bed's going to be the right comfort level for you. One thing I would say, sometimes you can check the reviews in advance. So before booking somewhere, you can check whether there's a particular complaint that keeps coming up in the reviews, because beds tend to be something that people comment quite a lot about, whether it's that they're too hard or that they're too soft. That can be really useful before actually booking somewhere. In terms of pillows, the difficulty is that pillows are, everyone likes a different pillow, and there's no kind of one set pillow that we can advise for people with axial SpA, because it depends on whether you have any changes or fusions in your neck, or anything else going on in the upper back as well. But there's a really good hack that you can do if you find that the pillow isn't supportive enough for you. So you take the pillow sort of in front of you, and then along the length of the pillow, you can roll up a hand towel and then thread it inside the pillowcase so that it's lying on the length of the pillow. So when you're lying on your side, you have the rolled up towel just in the small of your neck, and that can provide just a little bit more support without sort of pushing the head up, that you find if you have stacked pillows. That towel can just provide a little bit more support in the small of the neck, and that can be a really good kind of makeshift way. But some people do actually take pillows with them, particularly if you're driving and you're not limited in terms of space. Or you can get pillows that kind of fold down when you press the air out. So some people do that, so then they're able to pack them away in a suitcase. So do consider looking into that if you travel frequently and you find it difficult to find the right pillow for you when you are away. And finally, as well, looking at any mobility aids that might be helpful for you. So you might find that actually having something like a folding walking stick can be really useful, so that on days when you are doing lots of walking, you've got something available to help, but then you're able to pack it away really easily as well. So do consider that as well. And think about having a travel toolkit. So if you've watched some of our previous videos, we quite often talk about having our pain toolkit or our flare toolkit. And you can actually create a travel toolkit. So it does depend on kind of where you're going, depends on what you can put in it. But generally, looking at kind of the things that day to day you've used to help manage your symptoms, or during a flare, what are the go-to things that you have, so that even when you are going away and you're actually feeling quite good at the moment, it's much better to pack them away into a sort of travel toolkit and have them available, because then when you are away, if you do get a flare up or anything, any sort of pain building up, you've got your go-to things that are going to help you without having to worry about finding healthcare professionals somewhere away from home, or finding a pharmacy, anything like that. So just on screen, I've popped up a few things that you might consider. So things like a heat pad or a cold pad, if you find that hot or cold really helps your symptoms. TENS machines can be great at really reducing the pain and also just distracting from it as well. If you have any sort of joint supports or pillows, as I mentioned, that can be helpful, like inflatable pillows, and the different medication options that you find helpful. So it might be that you have your general medication, then you have stronger things that you go to if you are flaring. Again, making sure that there aren't any restrictions on those medications if you're traveling abroad. And then finally, having your health insurance or your travel insurance details to hand as well. So that then if you did need to get in contact with them or get any assistance when you're there, you're able to find that really easily. It takes the pressure off when you are feeling a bit rubbish. And then you can create almost like a mini toolkit, so then when you're going out day to day, you've got it. So like you'd have a bag just with your sun cream in, your sunglasses, things like that. Just having a mini bag where you've got those things that help. It might be like an anti-inflammatory gel, or those pain medications, things like that. Just making sure that you've got those to hand and you don't get caught out without them. So as I mentioned, I've got lots of useful resources and links here. So after the session, I'll pop a link to those in the comments, so you can come back and access any of those links. So we've linked onto lots more detailed advice, including Colin's summer travel advice video as well, where he goes into these topics in a bit more detail too. But my key takeaways really are to plan ahead and prepare well, because that helps just take the pressure off a little bit and makes things more enjoyable as well. Do think outside the box, so thinking about the different things that might help you. And one of the hardest things, I think it sounds really simple, but personally I certainly find it difficult, but do ask for help if needed, particularly if you're traveling with other people, or if you are somewhere like an airport and you need assistance, then do ask for it, because that's what people are there for and they don't mind helping. So it's well worth asking if you need it. And most importantly, enjoy as well. As I mentioned at the beginning, it can be difficult and it can be stressful thinking that we have a lot of things to think about and organise when you live with Axial SpA and you're travelling, but don't let it hold you back from travelling. And you can always get in contact with us on the helpline if you need any personalised advice. We're always happy to help. So I'm going to stop sharing the slides there and come back so that we can have a bit of a Q&A. But what I'll do is I'll give everyone a few minutes to pop any questions in the chat. So do ask if there's anything I haven't covered, any advice you're looking for, anything you're struggling with your, with traveling with your condition. Pop that in the chat and I'll answer as many as I can. But in the meantime, while you're adding your questions, I'm going to go through those stretches. So I'm just going to move my chair back and bring the camera down so you can see me a little bit better. So these are the stretches that I mentioned to help if you're seated for a long time, whether that's on a plane, on the train, or in the car. So these are nice subtle stretches that hopefully won't disrupt your neighbours too much, and they can all be kind of converted to actually be able to do when you're standing as well, most of them. So it can be useful, in both ways. But firstly, I'm going to start with one stretch, or one movement you're not going to be able to see, but I'm going to start with my feet flat on the floor and my legs sort of relaxed like that. So I can have my hands resting on my lap. And then you're just going to lift one heel up off the floor, take it down, and then lift the other. So you're just doing this movement with your heels, bringing your heels off the floor. And this is really good for your ankles, gets a little bit of movement into your knees, but it's also really good for boosting the circulation in your legs as well. So when you're sitting for a while, that's really, really important. Good. And then the next one, you're going to, I'll turn to the side, you should be able to see this. You're going to straighten the leg in front of you and then bring it down. Oh, bit of a click there. That's my hip. So you're moving the knees. You can do a few sort of ankle circles or sort of ankle foot rotations at the same time if you want, but just bring them forward. Of course, if you've got a seat in front of you, you might not be able to straighten all the way out, but any sort of movement through the knees can be really good. Great, I'm going to come back to the front. And then the next one, we're going to keep our hips planted. We're just going to, one at a time, let the knee just drop out to the side so you're rotating that hip out. Just going to drop the knee out. And then left, good. It's just getting a bit of a stretch into the hip, up into the sacroiliac joint as well, a little bit of movement. And that can be really good. You can even, if you want to do a stronger stretch, you can even bring the knee up, pop the ankle onto the knee of the other leg, and then just gently push down with that hand. And that gets a nice stretch all the way up into the hip and into the buttock, the glute muscles as well. Good. And you can do the other way around. So you can raise that left knee, bring the left ankle on top of the right knee, and then just gently press down if you like to. Good. Then the next, we're going to do a little bit of movement through the pelvis and through the lower back. So with this, again, keep the hands resting so that you're not bumping into your neighbours. And we're just going to shift the weight over to the left side and hitch that right hip up a little bit. So it's almost like you could get your hand underneath your hip there and then come back down. And the same, so shifting over to the right, lift that left hip. So what you're doing is you're getting a bit of a side bending movement through your lower back. And that can really loosen up through those low back joints. But it's really subtle, as you can see. You can even do it where you tilt your left shoulder over and hitch your left hip at the same time to make it a little bit stronger. But generally, I know we usually have very little room on a plane or a train, but generally you can do these kind of movements without disrupting the person next to you too much. Good. And then next we're going to do some pelvic rocking. So I'm going to turn to the side for this. And what you're going to do is you're going to start by just slumping down. So you're pushing your low back into the chair. And then you're going to arch the other way. And you can lean your body forward a little bit to give you a bit more room. You can even scoot to the front of the seat and then just really slump down and arch back, like so. Good. I'll come back to the center. And then the hip shifting that I showed was already starting a bit of a side bending movement, but you can increase that a little bit by bringing the shoulders into it, like so. And then to get a bit of a twisting, you can fold the elbows in front of you, so you're keeping your arms out of the way of the person next to you, and just bring the shoulders around, letting the head follow. This is a lovely stretch to get into your ribs as well. Good. And then relax the hands down. And finally, some neck movement, so you can bring the chin down towards the chest. And if it's comfortable, you can roll it over to the left and to the right. Ooh, getting a few clicks in the neck as well, which is completely normal. Good. And then finally, to stretch out into the back of the neck, you can do the lovely chin tuck or double chin exercise, as I like to call it. With this, you keep your eyes facing forward and your head nice and level, so you're not looking up with the head or down. Keep the head level, and then you're trying to bring your head back towards your seat. So you're just bringing it back, giving yourself a lovely double chin or a chin tuck. One more for luck. Good. And just do a few shoulder shrugs and rolls just to finish off there. So that was my really simple routine of seated exercises that you can do to help to give you a little bit more movement even when you are sitting in one place. So whether that's on a plane, a train, or in the car. As I said, it's not a replacement for getting up and walking around. That's still really important, but it can just give you a little bit more comfort in the meantime. So thank you everyone for joining me today. I've got a couple of minutes. If there are any questions that I haven't covered, please do pop them in the chat box. I'll just have a look on Facebook and Instagram to see whether there's anything that hasn't popped up on my screen. I can see someone on Instagram's asked if they should continue to take medication and they've not had any pain in a couple of months. So that would definitely depend on the type of medication that you're taking. So I'd recommend chatting to your healthcare professional because there's different treatments. So if it was something like a biologic treatment, they do recommend that you continue taking that because often if you stop taking it, then the pain does return. Whereas if it's an anti-inflammatory medication, usually that's something that if it gets the pain under control, they'd recommend that you then stop taking and only take it during a flare-up. But definitely speak to your healthcare professional for specific advice on that, and make sure that's all suitable for you. Oh, thanks, Rachel. I'm glad it was helpful. And hopefully lots of people are booking their summer holidays. I've literally just booked a flight, so this was well timed for me to revisit and make sure that I practice what I preach as well. So Astrid has asked about, this is a great question. Any guidance on timings for medication with regard to changing time zones? So this one, I would say it depends again on the medication that you're taking. If it's something where you're taking it really regularly, usually you would just stick to that same timing. So, if you take it every 8 hours or once a day, just stick to your same time zone. If it's something like an anti-inflammatory, that's probably something that would be okay to then change, so that if you say, for example, you like taking it in the evening so that then you get the anti-inflammatory effect overnight to help you sleep better, or similarly with a painkiller, that you should be able to change, but chat to your healthcare professional, because what they would probably advise is that you delay it so that you don't take it earlier than you would have done normally. So you might get a bit of time in between where you don't have the medication that you normally would have, but they would generally say to do that. So generally stick to the same timings, but change it if it is that you need the assistance of that medication at a specific time, so like overnight. But yeah, hopefully that was helpful, Astrid. So we've got a minute or two. I can answer any other questions, so do feel free to pop them in there. And Cara's asked about biologic therapy with airport security and if they're counted within your liquid allowance. I've never come across that. Generally, they would treat that as something separate. So particularly because you take them through in a cool bag, and there's a very small amount of liquid in there as well. So I've only ever heard that they've just treated them completely separately. They wouldn't expect you to take them out of the cool bag and put them in with other liquids or anything like that. Making sure that you've got the paperwork related to them can be really helpful. But you can always contact either the airline or the airport that you're traveling through as well in advance, just to make sure. But yeah, normally they wouldn't ask you to take them out. They treat them completely separately. Wonderful. So I'll keep an eye on the chat for a few days after this as well. So if anybody's watching on catch up, I'll try and catch any questions. But if you are joining us and catching up a little bit later, then do feel free to email me any questions if there's anything that I haven't covered. So my email address is zoe@nas.co.uk. And so what I'll do is I'll finish up for today then, but thank you everyone for joining. I hope it's been helpful, and do let us know if it's useful. Feel free to share your advice and experiences in the comments. And if you do have a trip, do let us know when you come back. Pop in the comments whether this has been helpful and hopefully made it an even more enjoyable experience. So what I'll do is I'll finish up now, but we'll have another live stream in a few weeks. So do sign up to our e-newsletter if you'd like to hear about that when we start advertising it. Again, I'll pop a link in the comments to sign up to our e-news as well. Or if you're watching on Instagram, we've got a link in our link tree. So thanks again, everyone, and hopefully see you at the next one. Take care.